In Part 1, I referenced a contract between European and African merchants on the Gold Coast of West Africa in what is now the nation of Ghana. Let's take a look at this contract and what we can learn from it. I've often heard these referred to as slave contracts because they were between enslavers, but I've pored over my fair share of these from the Dutch West India Company, the British Royal African Company, and the Prussian Brandenburg Africa Company, and I've never seen enslaved captives mentioned. Generally, they read like Feudal European vassalage agreements. A vassalage agreement was an agreement between two civilizations for fealty and protection. It was a contract that formalized the relationship between a European ruler, in this case the 10 men who ran the Dutch West India Company, and the King of Aquaffo of the African kingdom of Komenda, neither of which signed this paper. Rather, Europeans who brought and signed them were signing on behalf of their rulers back home. Also notice how half the document is handwritten and the other half has been printed out by a printing press. That was because Europeans brought these printed out contracts with lots of blank space with them in slave ships when traveling to Africa. What is printed was non-negotiable and decided by Europeans. What was handwritten was negotiable. Africans demanded a lot of flexibility when dealing with Europeans. Also, take a look at this bottom corner where you can see symbols and initials for African signatories. Above it reads, in Dutch, that the undersigned had been provided with a translator who explained everything in the contract to their satisfaction prior to signing. So what was in these contracts? It varied dramatically. Aside from a formalized relationship and some promise of mutual military protection, clauses that Africans added to the contracts ranged from mandatory gifts like textiles from Europeans to taxes to rent for the land on which Europeans built their trading forts to fees for the African canoemen who ferried people and cargo back and forth between anchored ships and land. Stay tuned for Part 3.